going on, everybody? This is Macho Cine Talks with David Liz. I am David Liz. This is a podcast about the movies that men love, why we love them, and their impact on society. Today's episode is called Macho Movies, Masculinity in Movies. What is masculinity? How is it depicted in movies? Today with me is my boy, Abraham Valdes. He is fellow macho movie enthusiast. The guy's a genius, you know, like I hype him up. I don't really need to. The guy like went to Harvard and studied like the hardest thing you could study there. And, you know, there's only two kinds of people that go to Harvard, geniuses and people that are rich. And I know for a fact you weren't rich when you got into Harvard. I'm just happy to have you here, man. Thank you so much for
man, thanks, bro.
Spending some time. Another person that we have with us behind the scenes is our boy, Pico. He is the guy with the manliest voice on podcast. Give us a little bit of a taste of that voice, Pico.
Hello. I thought this whole podcast was called Macho Podcast. That's just the name of the episode?
Well, no, it's...
What's the name of the show?
The podcast is called Macho Cine Talks. But today's episode is Macho Movies.
Flicks.
It's the first episode, Macho Movies. It's appropriate for...
One man, one desire.
Well,
this joke is not stolen from Pablo Francisco.
One man, one solution. Arnold Schwarzenegger this summer is... No! Little Tortilla Boy.
Get down! So I think we should start with a simple question. What is masculinity to you? Tell me, what's masculinity?
So, you know, in the olden days, right, there was I think there was a time where the Greeks defined something on the basis of its function, right? Like, what is it for? And what's the function of being a man? And I come back to there's three basic things, right? A man has to do three things. He has to produce, he has to reproduce, and he has to protect. And those are the three basic functions. And we'll get into it a little bit later, right? But I think probably all three of those functions are under attack. They've been probably under attack in some way, shape, or form the instant we formed civilization. Probably over the last 50, 60 years, right? As society and technology has evolved, some of those functions have come down. Now, we'll talk about other things that support those functions, right? We'll talk about things like courage or competency, love, right? Loyalty, right? Those are all other themes, but those themes kind of in some way support those three basic functions of what a man needs to do.
Is there something wrong? Or...
No.
Okay.
Ignore me. I'm just trying to be a producer over here. Make sure that your cameras are rolling.
You're producing too loudly.
We got to leave all the bloopers, man, because that's what gives this thing a soul.
I think part of masculinity is the concept of fatherhood. When you don't have a father as a child, and I can attest to this because I was basically fatherless until I was 8 years old and my stepdad came into the picture. I remember the feelings of needing some kind of a masculine influence in my life. I remember being like a young boy and my mom, she didn't make very much money, but she scrounged enough money to buy me a Walkman for Christmas. But she didn't get me a tape. She just got me a Walkman. And for those young people watching this, look it up on Google. It's a really cool thing. You put the tape in the Walkman. It makes music happen. We didn't have Spotify. We didn't have Pandora back then. Anyways, we go to Kmart.
It's a good day to be at Kmart.
You grew up in Hialeah. I grew up in Hialeah. You know what Kmart I'm talking about.
Yeah.
49th Street. It's no longer there. They had a bin filled with cassette tapes, discount cassette tapes, tapes that nobody wanted to listen to, you know, oldies or just like whatever. And so my mom leaves me there and I'm just like looking through all the tapes and I see one that the picture caught my attention. It's like this dude and he's like, he looks like a dude, right? He has like, he's singing into the mic. He's wearing like a rhinestone one piece. You already know where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
It was Elvis. I listened to it for the first time when I got home and, you know, just like having like that deep masculine voice was like soothing to me because I didn't get that on a regular. And I listened to that tape over and over and over until it wore out. And I feel like that was like my first taste of masculinity in home. Eventually, I started like watching more TV and I saw this show called Hercules.
No matter the obstacle, as long as there were people crying for help, there was one man who would never rest. Hercules.
And that was like my next image of a masculine man on TV. that I idolized and wanted to be like. I'd watch Hercules and do sit-ups and do push-ups and wanted to be buff and strong like him. And then eventually I got introduced to Rocky. And then to me, like, that's just like, you know, the pinnacle of masculinity.
Let's go back to your corner now. Let's go.
Bust you up.
Go for it.
At, you know, 9 years old or whatever I was. So then this brings us into like, what is a masculine man in movies? And like, who's a good example? Like for you, to you, like who do you think is a good example of a masculine man in a movie?
Yeah, look, and I think there's a range, and some of them are contradictory, right? I think, you know, at least when we were growing up in the 80s and 90s, you had Stallone and Schwarzenegger, right?
Adrian!
You got Clooney and Pitt in a way in the Ocean's movies, right?
Yeah. That's like early 2000s.
Yeah. I was on a plane this last weekend and I saw Casablanca for the first time.
Red, you go. Where shall I go? What shall I do?
Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn.
And it kind of held up, right? I think it held up, right? Watching it on JetBlue in the small screen. But I can tell you, Bogart carried that.
Yeah.
Right? Like he carried that movie, and he carried it by being a masculine man. And you can kind of run through the checklist of every aspect of that character and how it fit. We could go through it, right? But how it fits masculinity. But I'll even throw one or two others that that you might not think of, right? And when we were on the car right here, I mentioned Robin Williams and Mrs. Doubtfire.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Guy's running around
That's
in a
funny.
dress.
Yeah.
He's going up against Pierce Brosnan, who's turning him into a cuckold, right? As he like has sex with his ex-wife. But at the end of the day, right? Robin Williams in that movie, and I never saw the movie, right? But I know what it's about, right?
It's been around long enough that it's part of like
the social zeitgeist or whatever, right? Williams has to wear a dress to try to get back his kids in that movie, right?
Well, that's because Pierce Brosnan is too much of a man.
Yeah,
He's
no, I
too
guess
manly.
so.
The only thing you could do to outdo a man, I guess, is wear a dress.
I guess in that scenario, and there's another, and I did see this movie a long time ago. It's called Life is Beautiful, and it was an Italian movie, and it's by a comedian, and it's about a father and son, right? And they're in a concentration camp in the Holocaust, and basically, you know, he turns the whole thing into a game, and he's hiding his kid in the camp to make sure he doesn't get caught, and telling the kid that there'll be a prize for whoever comes out, and you know, you'll get a tank out of it, right? So it's creating this notion of fantasy in the child in this, you know, the most horrific environment imaginable, right? And almost, you know, I'm almost getting as close as I'm going to get to a tear, hopefully.
Nice.
At the very end of the movie, right, the Nazis lose the war and they get freed by the Allies, and he's desperately looking for his son because he can't find him in all the chaos. And he sees the son coming in this tank by the Allies, and the son's at the top of the tank saying, "Hey, Dad, I did it. I won the tank. I won the tank."
Yeah.
So, you know, that in a way is masculine, right? Just being able to give your kid hope, right? So it's a range of things, right? It's Arnold, you know, beating the shit out of some guy. It's Robin Williams wearing a dress. It's
To be with his children, doing whatever it takes to be with his children. That's what he was doing, really.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the only in he saw in that movie, and he took it
Yeah.
just because he wanted to be
with his
the
children.
best father he could.
Yeah, it was part of being a father, right? Or Humphrey Bogart, right, in Casablanca, right, which you go back, right, in a sense, movies had just kind of started there, right? I don't know how long it was, right? Maybe it was 20, 25 years, right? That movie came in 1941, maybe. You probably
When
had...
sound is introduced.
Sound was just probably recently, you didn't have color. So think about the impact, right? Because everything we see today as a derivative is something that's been seen 50 times, right? It's why the new Star Wars movies will never have the impact of that 1976 or 77 first Star Wars movie. That's the same thing. And the way Rhett Butler in Gone with the Wind articulated a certain kind of manhood, Rick Blaine in Casablanca did something similar, right? And it works, right? That manhood in both of those cases, 80, 100 years later, still works today.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But you know, it's funny because it's part of masculinity is also competition and wanting to one-up each other, right? And you'll see it like in brothers growing up where like the one kid is like, "Hey, Mom, look at me. I can jump really high." And then the other kid's like, "Look, Mom, I can jump on one foot." And then like the other one's like, "Look, I can do a cartwheel." We're always trying to one-up each other. So like when we look back at masculine archetypes of the 50s or the 60s, you know, they were showing their masculinity way differently than the movies today show it, but with a single stare or a slap or even just like a punch, that was enough. That was enough action. But then now, as we continue in the timeline of masculinity in movies, it just like we one up it, you know. Then it goes to like, now it's not just a punch. Now we have to see a guy getting shot.
Guy getting thrown through a window off the third floor, right?
Right, yeah.
Rick Blaine didn't throw any punches in Gone with the Wind, and he shoots the gun once.
Right.
At the very end. He never holds a gun, I think, till the very end of the movie, and he doesn't shoot anybody. Happens to be a Nazi, right? Yeah. At the end of the movie.
Well, now we're like at a point where we have like Fast and the Furious, and they're able to like take a car into space. I mean, to me, like, it's just gotten so ridiculous.
We're a bunch of teenage punks. It started off as a bunch of teenage punks drag racing, right? Now they're
it was
like,
more believable, right? Like when you watch the first Fast and the Furious.
Yeah, no, it was believable, right?
Yeah.
It's just
it was grounded.
Sense, right? Now, like, yeah, it's now it's like that James Bond scene where Pierce Brosnan is like kite surfing before kite surfing was popular off of like some, ice avalanche or something like that, right?
Right,
it
right.
just gets out of hand.
Yeah, I mean, it's not new though. I mean, we can go back to Indiana Jones and Temple of Doom, where it's like the very beginning, right? And they're in the airplane, and it's the kid and the girl, and then the pilots jump out with the parachutes, and so Indy has to inflate a raft, and with the raft they jump out of the airplane. Luckily, land on a mountain covered in snow, and so they basically go down the mountain, and as soon as the mountain ends, it's a cliff, and then they fall, presumably to their death, but no, they land in a river, right? And it's just like this ridiculous notion that they would survive. But I mean, it's all to show Indy's masculinity, his competency, like, hey, don't worry, I got this. We don't have parachutes. We're in an airplane with no pilot. We're going to survive with this raft, and we're just going to jump out of it. It's going to be fine. Like, we admire him because he's able to figure it out, even if it's implausible or impossible. And I think that's what the Fast and the Furious movies are.
No, the theme of competence, right? And look, competence goes to all these other things, right? Competence goes to your ability to produce, right? Competence goes to your ability to reproduce, right? Knowing how to handle yourself, get the woman, keep her happy, and competence goes to your ability to protect, right? If you go through those pillars. But yeah, in almost every case where there is masculinity, right, the person is competent, whether it's Rick Blaine, Rhett Butler, Shane, Rocky Balboa as a boxer, James Bond, right, who can shoot a gun, fly a plane, drive a submarine, disarm a nuclear weapon, right? Speak multiple languages. Liam Neeson in Taken, right? The guys in Ocean's 11, they were competent, right? They, and it's competence in, what you're doing, competence in terms of having the self-confidence to deal with new situations. But there's also a confidence out there to be able to deal with the sleazy side of the world, right? To go out there beyond that place that's the family, right?
Right.
At the end of the day, the man comes back to the family, but there has to be some competence and ability to go outside of the family.
Right.
Right. To go where there's danger. And other men are dangerous, right? Casablanca, right? If you look at that movie, it's a dangerous place, right? Like this town in Africa outside of the world where you had, criminals and Nazis and spies and all these people from all over the place. And Rick Blaine knew how to navigate that underworld, right? And in a sense, keep himself safe, but keep other people safe, right? Liam Neeson, right? He knew, right? He was a spy, right? And Taken, he knew how to navigate the world around these guys who were like kidnapping young girls, right? To basically sell them. It's competence and awareness, but there's always some kind of connection sometimes of that dangerous world that's outside of the house.
Absolutely. And I like this topic of competence because it's probably the aspect of masculinity that's most used in film, in cinema. Everybody can admire a competent man.
Yeah.
And I think we strive as men to be competent because we believe that at the end of competence is going to be respect. And that's what us as men ultimately is what we're seeking. We want to be respected by our peers. We believe that if we're respected, we will attract a girl. Respect is an important thing to a man. But also at the same time, you always see competence and confidence together, like for the most part.
Yeah.
I want to see, Pico, the clip from Taken, and I just want you to see how, oh, check it out. You've seen this, everybody's seen this.
Your cousins are back? All right, listen to me.
Oh, God.
Do you need anyone on the plane?
No.
In the airplane?
No. Yes, Peter.
Peter. All right. Did he know where you were staying?
He knows what to do right away.
Yeah.
He is confident in his ability, and he's competent. He has all the tools.
Stay focused, kid. You have to focus together.
It's not his first rodeo, you know?
Yeah.
Now, the next part is very important. They're going to take you. Yeah, stay focused, baby. This is key. You will have 5, maybe 10 seconds. Very important seconds.
Oh, glitch.
Concentrate. Shout out everything you see about them. Hair color, eye color, tall, short, scars. Anything you see, you understand?
This is my favorite part.
I don't know who you are. I don't know what you want. If you're looking for ransom, I can tell you I don't have money. But what I do have are a very particular set of skills. Skills I've acquired over a very long career. Skills that make me a nightmare for people like you. If you let my daughter go now, that'll be the end of it. I will not look for you. I will not pursue you. But if you don't, I will look for you. I will find you.
And I will kill you.
And I will kill you.
Good luck. Man, what a scene. Like that scene is just like competence to the max. You want to be that guy. Like,
And it's competence under extreme pressure.
Yeah.
Right? And it's not just the pressure of something happening to him. It's the pressure of something happening to his daughter in a situation where he can't do anything. And he takes those 15 seconds or 10 seconds of her throwing out details, and it's probably 3 or 4 details that he gets out of it. And he uses that to save her. Right?
Connects the dots. And, you know, like, I think that when us as viewers, we watch something like that, the masculine audience thinks to themselves, what would happen if somebody kidnapped my daughter? What would I do? What would I be capable of doing? Most of us wouldn't be capable of doing anything.
No.
We'd have to rely on the cops.
Not most of us, right? The reality is all of us, right? Like, I don't care if you're a Navy SEAL or whatever, right? Maybe there's one Navy SEAL in history that's going to pull off that Neeson and them.
Yeah.
It's not most of us.
Yeah.
It's all of us. Right?
It's all of us.
No one's going to do it in that situation, right?
Speak for
However much you
yourself,
want to.
mother.
Oh, that's right. No, I forgot. Yeah, you did that
Guns
in
blazing, all right?
the Helsinki incident of '93, right? That was you.
That was you, right, Pico?
But shoot through the phone.
This guy. When you watch a scenario like that, it's what we wish that we could do. It's what can't really aspire to that because, again, like, it's impossible. It's almost an impossible feat what he accomplished. So then at the same time, we see extreme confidence, extreme competency. I think that a more realistic interpretation of masculinity in the real world is when we're confronted with a challenging task, we don't have confidence. Our nature is to perhaps think that we're unable to achieve this feat. And one example of this in cinema, and Pico, if you can, bring up the first clip.
This guy got these videos from the dark web.
No, but don't go all the way back. Just forward it a little bit, yeah.
Would you watch Fast and the Furious if they went back to the first one, like to that style?
I love that.
I think supposedly, I didn't look it up. I just read a headline. Supposedly, they're going to do that. It's going to go back to being Yeah, like back.
I mean,
to being
how do you come back though, right? Like they're like secret agents now.
I know.
right?
They have to. I think they have to kill them all off at the beginning,
And
they're
maybe it's
like,
Toretto's kid or
"Family,
something.
We gotta race for pigs. It's gonna save the world.
We got to race for pigs.
I think what'll happen there is what happened with Rocky, right? He starts off like a normal guy trying to chase his dream, and then every single movie after that kept getting more extreme, more like unrealistic until he finally fights the Russian.
Yeah.
He basically
I
ends
mean,
the
Rocky
Cold
1
War
and 2 were
himself.
okay, but you got like an escalation with like Clubber just being like something else, right? And
to
then
the next level.
Drago
Yeah.
is.
At some point, Stallone said, well, what can we do to top Rocky's fight with Drago? Well, we can't do anything. So maybe what we can do is go back to the basics. And then that's why he brings back Alvidson, who I believe is the director of Rocky 5, who directed Rocky 1, put Rocky back in Philadelphia, and everybody considers that the worst Rocky. So I don't have much faith for the Fast and the Furious
you can't
bringing
bring it
it back.
My favorite Rocky movie has to be the one where they were claymation and they were drinking Lipton Brisk IQ.
It's brisk, baby. I'm really thirsty.
Right? Wasn't it something? He was at
He's
the
like getting beat up. Rocky, you can't keep on. You can't go on. I just need something to drink.
Reading of his life.
Who keeps ringing that bell? I can't concentrate.
It's over, Rock.
Nothing is over. Just give me something to drink.
And Balboa needs a miracle.
Yo, that's brisk, baby.
Get in there.
All right, look, let's see the scene.
Yeah, it don't matter, because I was nobody before.
Don't say that.
Man, it looks like it was recorded with a potato.
Hey, that's YouTube, baby.
No, I think it was a format too back then.
Either,
Watch shots.
Because I was thinking, it really don't matter if I lose this fight. It really don't matter if this guy opens my head either. Because all I want to do is go the distance. Nobody's ever gone the distance with Creed. And if I can go that distance, seeing that bell rings and I'm still standing, I want to know for the first time in my life that I weren't just another bum from the neighborhood.
And scene. Wow. To me, that is a man who is just desperate to prove himself. He wants not only the respect of others, but he wants to be able to respect himself.
You know what? First of all, any self-respecting man wouldn't be the little spoon, all right?
Okay, well. Sure they did that for camera purposes.
No.
Yeah.
I don't want my Rocky Balboa to be the little spoon, all right?
True. I didn't notice and I didn't think about it, but there's something there, bro. Yeah.
I've seen this movie about like 1,000 times and I never really noticed.
I want to be the little spoon.
Hey, I like being the little spoon. Ain't nothing wrong with being the little spoon.
There's nothing wrong with being a little spoon. I just wanted to be...
You just want to be a jerk.
I just wanted to be silly.
But the fear that we have as men that we're never going to
be the little spoon,
fully realize ourselves. And then once you're confronted with that thing, that task, that business opportunity, whatever it is, that will allow you to prove to yourself that you're not just another bum from the neighborhood, that you're not just another a cualquiera, as we say in Spanish. You're more than that. That's when like fear creeps in. I think that's when self-doubt creeps in. That's Rocky 1. Then if we skip over to Rocky 2, on the second clip, this is right after he beats Apollo. And go ahead and play it. I think this is very interesting here. Getting respect from peers.
Yeah, I love you too. Most of all, I want to thank God. Except for my kid being born. This is the greatest night in the history of my life. I just want to say one thing to my wife who's home. Yo, Adrian! I did it!
Man. What did he do? He won the fight. But I don't think that's all he's saying. I think he's also telling her, yo, Adrian, I did it. I proved to myself that I'm not just another bum from the neighborhood.
Yeah, I know there's probably something there, right? Like most people look at that as like the fight, But that's the other piece. I do think this notion of self-confidence is important, right? And so I talk to my son a little bit sometimes about it, right? And I try to get him this message, right? And he's like 7, and I've been bringing this up for a couple of years with him, right? Because if there's something he can't do, or he's afraid that he's not going to do it, or can't do it well, he doesn't try, right? And when I think about breeding self-confidence, right, it's not the self-confidence that you're good at something. It's the self-confidence that even if you suck at something, even if you do something and it's a disaster and you fuck it up, or you're 30th out of 29 people, you're in the competition and you're the 31st best guy out of the 29, right? That you're that bad, that your self-worth doesn't change because of that, right? And I think that's the important lesson, right? That the self-confidence is some intrinsic value you see in yourself regardless of competence.
Right.
Now, the balance there is like, it can't be like, hey, it doesn't matter what the result is. I don't care. You don't want the balance to be that other way, right? That, hey, I don't care. I don't want to try. The outcome doesn't matter. The outcome still needs to matter, and you still need to put in the effort. But it can't be that your self-esteem is based on just the winning, right? Or just the result, right? You still need to believe in yourself and value yourself. Even if you suck at every single thing you do, you still need to believe in yourself and have that sense of self-worth, right? And I think when you can achieve that and still balance it, right? Still balance it with, I care, I got to work at it, I got to try, I got to compete, I got to still do all these things, right? And find a way to have the self-worth, the need to compete, but still preserve that self-worth. I think that's self-confidence, right? When you can do that even in the absence of competence.
And the thing is that competence does not happen overnight. It's competence is a skill. Yeah. If your son, he may not want to do something because he feels he's bad at it, but he'll never get good if he doesn't continue to do it over and over and over again, right? And that's kind of like, that's the way you form competence. Competence is not a given.
And this is the thing, right? Like you look at, all of these athletes, right? At least the great ones, right? The really, really great ones, right? You think Tyson, Jordan, all of these guys, right? And look, they're all naturally gifted, but the reality is like the really, really great ones are working their ass off, right? Like how hard, when Tyson was in his prime or whatever they call it, right? That period in his life, he was working his ass off.
Oh,
right?
yeah, for sure.
Same with like Lennox Lewis when he was at his best, he was working his ass off, right? Jordan and Kobe, they worked harder than anybody else, right? So it's very rare, right? Like when you see movies, like you see a lot of movies, there's a tendency to put in the movie the guy that just kind of shows up and he's just naturally more gifted than everybody else and he doesn't have to work at anything, right?
Right.
Like Good Will Hunting, right?
Yeah.
He was just like a genius, right? And you see a lot of movies like that, right? But the real life is more like Rocky, right? Where you got to work and sweat and bust your ass to be good at anything. You still need the natural talent, right? Like everything will equal, the natural talent guy is working just as hard as you are, maybe even harder. But without hard work, there's going to be some other guy with natural talent that's going to kick your ass.
Heck, there might be a guy with no natural talent, but he works his tail off.
And
totally. He'll beat your butt too, man. And that's the reality of it. Hard work trumps talent any day of the week. And I'm a true believer of that. Something else that is depicted in films a lot, and I think it's very, very, it speaks a lot to what masculine energy or masculinity is your willingness to die for your convictions. In real life, we wish we were so bold and brave to die for our convictions, but that's why we turn to movies where we see men, fictional men, some based on real characters, willing to die for something that they believe in so wholeheartedly. To me, the movie that comes to mind is Braveheart.
Yeah.
It all starts with a woman that he loves and she's killed and he gets revenge. So he just slaughtered everybody and now he's face to face with the guy.
Did you just skip the best part?
I did because it's too long. But this is really the best part. This is when he gets revenge.
He just finished kicking everybody's ass.
He did. But right here, just look at his... You're living through this guy's eyes. He's able to project the character so well. kicks him down the hill. It's like no hesitation. Done. Instant revenge. And then this leads into the beginning of a rebellion for the freedom of Scotland. And he remembers there's a lot going on here. He's remembering his dad tried to fight against the British who were invading their lands. I don't even know if it was called Scotland back then. Somebody in the comments should correct me if I'm misremembering history. But at the end of the movie, he is so entrenched in this war and he believes in his cause so much that once he's captured and he's about to be executed, he's given a chance to end his suffering if he will only just go against his convictions.
Well, even before that, right? And I think the actual history is, I think she usurps when Longshanks dies. I forget her name. The
Queen of France.
She actually finds a way to get rid of the son, and she took the English throne for some period.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Now my son Abraham would be able to explain it because he's got the English line of succession going back.
And
to
also
1066.
he's a genius.
She goes in the movie. There's a scene where she's offering some kind of poison or some kind of narcotic
to
numb the pain. And he says, "Hey, I need to go through this pain, and I need to have my senses with me.
I need my wits about me.
Drink this. It will dull your pain."
No, it will numb my wits, and I must have them all. For if I'm senseless or if I wail, then Longshanks will have broken me.
Yeah, so that he doesn't give up his conviction. But yeah, so he had multiple. He had another chance even before that.
That's right. Here, let's play it.
The prisoner wishes to say a word.
Like, oh, finally. It's all going to be fine now. He's going to... Oh, wait. And everybody's so disappointed. But he did not, because they know what's coming up next, right? They're going to kill him. I mean, he was going to get killed regardless, but he was willing to die for his convictions. To me, this movie's a masterpiece.
It was an awesome movie.
I love this movie.
But, look, this idea of willing to die for things, right, and why that's important for a man, it comes from a number of different places, right? And like Rome, there was a philosophy called Stoicism. I might be pronouncing it incorrectly. Stoicism, yeah. It's very linked to masculinity. And I think one of the themes around that was this idea that you can't control the outside world, but you can control yourself.
And how you respond to the outside world.
How you respond to it, how you think, how you feel, and what you say. So I think that was an important theme, and it comes up with kind of having the courage to stick with your convictions regardless of what the outside world is saying, right? But it comes back to, I come back to some of those themes, right? Produce and protect. Part of that is doing a job, right? When you're a man, you got to do a job.
Right.
And doing that job regardless of what the consequences or what the stakes are, right? You got to go and do that. And then the protect piece, right? For thousands, if not 100,000 years, right? The role of the man, that's that first line of defense, right? That's what you sacrifice when there is danger, right? Whether it's a war or somebody just attacking you and your family, right? And I come back to this stat about Russia. So in Russia, I think there's a stat that if you were a man born in the year 1923, you had an 80% chance of dying before you turned 26. And part of that was there was famine, purges, there was a lot of
war.
Stuff. But it was mostly that World War II, because that was the age that you were there to got sent into battle to die to protect the country, right? So that need to be able to die, right, or to be willing to die kind of comes from that, need to protect, right?
Right.
That role, that responsibility, that duty to protect. And it's not just your family, you're protecting the society,
That's right.
the country.
Yeah. Isn't that crazy? Like here in 2024, I mean, it's weird to be complaining from this position of privilege, right? Like, we don't have a war to fight. We don't have like these...
No, thank God we don't, bro, right? I mean,
but there's like, we've been fighting wars as men for thousands of years. And now we're like in this, at least in the United States, in this period of relative peace. So maybe we find some kind of relief watching films that scratch that itch that we all have inside.
And that's why to some degree the films are important, right? It's that catharsis, right? It's whether it's the, living through those things that are in our DNA, or living through those things that our DNA or culture and history have wired into our responsibility, right? Like the thing with the Neeson movie, right? Everyone has that sense for justice, but the role of providing justice, it's not your role for that as a man anymore, right? It's the job of the police.
Yeah.
Right? It's the job of the army. It's the job of society, right?
We've given up the responsibility to seek revenge for the greater good of society, right? Like, we don't do the duels anymore. Like, if you and I have a problem, we're going to go to litigation. We're not going to like shoot each other.
Is there any state that's still legal? I feel like there might be one.
No, I don't think so. Maybe West Virginia or something like that, man, but who knows?
Well, how did that song go again?
West Virginia.
No, it goes, country road
to the place I
belong, West Virginia, country, take me home, country road. Anyways, I think movies fill the gaps. Yeah. They allow us to envision ourselves in the characters and live out these things that we wouldn't be able to
fantasize, purge,
absolutely,
catharsize, to go through the catharsis. I mean,
when you had a problem with a guy back in the day and you were in a duel with him, a duel to the death or whatever it was, you weren't satisfied until the other guy was dead, basically. At the same time, after the duel was over, there's like a sense of respect for the other guy. Even today, a lot of guys will get into a fist fight, and after the fist fight is over, you've had a catharsis, you've released the emotion, and now instead of feeling anger or hate towards the other person, you almost feel respect for the other person. You realize that they put their life on the line just like you did, and now there's a sense of respect. Mutual respect, really.
In Texas and in Washington, mutual combat is legal. So as long as you both agree it's consensual and you don't hurt each other to the point where it's like major injuries or death, totally legal to beat each other up.
Wow. Okay. Well, great.
Illegal, but hey, you got to watch out.
Yeah.
You got to watch out not to hurt the guy.
Beat him up, but don't kick him
but not too much.
Don't kick him while he's down, basically.
Beat him up, but not too much.
Yeah.
Take a few punches.
Well, I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
We got to legalize it in Florida.
Yeah, well, maybe we're next. Go Florida, baby! Another thing about movies and masculine movies and macho movies is like this feeling of excitement when you're watching the hero accomplish his goal. Like, I mean, you grew up in the 80s, so that means that you got to watch some of the best films, action films, in theaters. Predator on the big screen, or to see any of the Rocky movies on the big screen. Like, for me, I watched them for the first time on VHS on a little TV, and the excitement I felt was like ripping my shirt off. It made me feel like flexing my muscles. It made me feel like going to find a girlfriend. That gave me confidence. And
when I was a little kid, like, I definitely liked the Rocky movies where he was like fighting, and I was a little kid and my mom would be cooking and I'd be jumping around, like taking every blow that Rocky took, going like this, and then like those
choreography.
Yeah, no, the choreography of like Rocky versus Clubber, right, or Rocky versus Drago, was definitely something, right? I definitely think like Braveheart and some of the Gibson movies, right? Apocalypto, right, where he's kind of running back to go face his family, find his wife and kid,
and then he has to do anything and everything to get back to them. So what a journey. And it's everything he does is like, I would imagine, I wasn't alive during the time of like the Aztecs. It seems pretty realistic, right? He's not driving a car into space.
Yeah, no, he's not driving a car into space, right?
Like your suspension of disbelief it's not like peeking into the red.
Yeah.
You're believing that this is possible.
Yeah.
And I think to me, like some of the best movies, they're able to keep your suspension of disbelief. Like to me, the worst movies are when like you're watching it and then you're like, oh, that could never happen. Oh.
Yeah, there's tension there, right? There's a danger to the hero. So in a Seagal movie, for most of the Seagal movies, right, he's just walking through. He fights the main bad guy. This is like the boss fight at the end of the movie, and it's like nothing, right? He's like Michael Myers, right? It's like a horror movie for the bad guys.
Well, there's a place for that, though. I love Seagal.
No, there is. I love those movies, but there isn't a lot of tension, right? Which is something that movies have lost, right? Because we've seen the hero win and survive so many times, right? Like I look at the new Star Wars movies that just came out, the Force Awakens and all that stuff, and at no point in the movie was I scared or worried about any of the good guys, anything happening, because I knew it was going to be okay. They're getting shot with laser beams. There's a lot of woo, there's a lot of that, but there was no tension of fear or anything going on, right?
Yeah,
and I think that has to be there, right? And in Apocalypto, they built that up, right? And part of it was the beginning where like his dad's throat gets slit in front of him or whatever. And
his dad gives him that bit of advice, right? Don't let fear creep in.
Yeah.
Because if you do, you're going to break down. And man, what a scene. I'm just remembering that scene with the dad, and they cut the dad's throat, and he's just in shock. Like he doesn't even know what to do. He's taken away. Whoa. I mean, just putting myself, and I always do this. I'm watching all these movies. I put myself in their shoes, and I'm thinking to myself, what would I do? Would I have the balls to go on that journey?
You know what was a big movie for, I don't know if you saw it in the theaters. You talk about like the bigger movies that made you feel. For me, it was The Matrix.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
The Matrix is a good movie.
We got to see those in the theater.
We did.
The Matrix, like I remember seeing it with a buddy. We were like, we're not working today.
That very first one?
The first one was the best one.
Yeah, you didn't need the others.
No, you didn't.
No.
But I'm glad they're there.
They're there because they're good, but they're not as good as the first.
I'm not sure they were that good. And I remember coming out of the Matrix, it was closed, right? He gets in that phone booth. He effectively, they leave you with the sense that he has the powers of God.
Yeah.
Right? He's in the phone booth and he flies off. What the f*** are the agents? He can stop the bullets. You didn't need another Matrix, right? It was finished, right? He was going to finish it there. They could have just stopped with that first movie.
And
that
they
movie was a masterpiece.
again.
It was a masterpiece.
And they made it like 20 years later, no? The latest Matrix was the new
I didn't see
Matrix.
That. But yeah, you didn't need
that one.
You didn't need that one.
You didn't need
either.
any of them. That first movie was a masterpiece.
It was. I remember like coming out of the theater, and me and my buddy, we thought we were Neo. And like we like, as 9-year-olds or whatever, we like ran to the edge of the stairs and we jumped from the top to the bottom, and we're like invincible, and we felt empowered and strong. And yeah, that was a good movie. That was a good movie.
One of the things, and in some ways, Stallone and Schwarzenegger are compared a lot, right? But if you look at Keanu in The Matrix and a lot of the Stallone characters, and you saw that in that Rocky clip, and you see it in not all, right? Like the Stallone in Cobra is like, whatever, right? That's like raw testosterone.
Yeah.
But if you look at, like, for example, Over the Top or the Rocky movies or some of the other movies, there's an underlying level of insecurity and fear.
Copland too is another.
Copland, right? In the Stallone guys, where he's not Michael Myers, right? Like this unstoppable force going to destroy all the bad guys.
He has like an average Joe quality to him.
Yeah, that he's unsure, maybe the competence isn't fully there, but he still goes out and gets the job done. And in some ways, I think that makes the Stallone movies a little bit better than some of the other movies. So that maybe that's one of the things that helps Stallone, having that insecurity or that lack of certainty, or the, hey, I don't know everything and I can't do everything. And you had that as a theme in a lot of his movies, whereas Arnold, it was generally different, right?
Like Arnold is a caricature.
Yeah, he's just kicking ass.
And there's a place for it, and I love Arnold's films. I love Predator. I love Terminator. Heck, I love Jingle All the Way. Like, I love Arnold's films, but the reality is that his depiction of masculinity was a caricature.
Yeah.
From the incredibly large physique, which I wish I could, get myself like that, but the reality is very few men can achieve that, right? His ability to wipe out the enemies, and even with a single one-liner, he's able to get the girl, or kill the dude, or it's a caricature, and I love the caricature, but it's not a more natural depiction of true masculinity.
Like Bruce Willis in Die Hard, right? He's bleeding, he's getting fucked up, he might not make it, right? It's a little different versus the Arnold, right, where he's
Yeah.
He's the alpha, right?
Oh, man, yeah. He's the alpha of alphas. He is the wolf on the mountain, and he has all he wants to eat. You know this from Pumping Iron? Have you ever seen that
Okay,
one?
no, I didn't see that.
But look, the wolf on the hill, right, is not as hungry as the wolf climbing the hill.
That's true.
See?
He's not as hungry, but
Not
when
as
he wants the
hungry.
food, it's there.
I thought you were a real man and you'd seen it.
What about John Wick?
John Wick, I never got into John Wick movies.
John Wick, it was good.
Yeah. Stop looking at me like that, Pico. Just because I haven't seen John Wick movies. When we start going back in time, we start thinking about these actors who portrayed masculine characters in movies, and we talk about Clint Eastwood. We talk about
John Wayne.
I mean, John Wayne, he's like the original, right? So, I mean, if we're going to go to the original, we're going to talk about Charlie Chaplin. We're going to talk about Buster
Charlie Chaplin
Douglas.
wasn't like that masculine, right?
In a time when filmmaking was in its infancy.
Yeah, like
and
Errol Flynn, Douglas Fairbank, about the same time. Flynn was like in the late
educate
30s.
me, because
I'm not that educated. I'm just guessing here. Clark Gable, right? Who did
well, he
Gone with
starts
the
coming in the 30s.
He starts coming in the 30s, right? And you had Bogart in the 40s, Gary Cooper, kind of 40s and 50s, and then Wayne kind of comes in the back end of the 50s, and he goes through the mid 70s.
Yeah.
Eastwood comes in the late 60s, goes through to the 90s.
Yeah.
Arnold and
Stallone.
You had kind of McQueen, Redford, and Newman kind of come in late 60s into the 70s.
Yeah. I mean, we have Al Pacino. He's a different kind of masculine.
I think so, yeah. And the Godfather.
Robert De Niro.
I think Robert De Niro in The Godfather 2 is pretty masculine the way he portrays Vito Corleone. So
Right.
De Niro in The Godfather 2, you should just go through all those De Niro clips, right? And he portrays a man, right?
Yeah. I mean, he's played so many characters. I think of Taxi Driver.
Taxi Driver, right?
Like, he's like a crazy man, but
Raging Bull.
Yeah, Raging Bull. When I think back to Taxi Driver, and he's like a vet, a Vietnam vet, and he's
The
just
Deer Hunter.
Deer Hunter also. We were talking about this earlier too, how men would go to war, right? Young men, 18, 19, whatever, they go to war. And the reason they go to war is because they're seeking respect. But when they come back, they want to be seen as heroes, because really they are. They are heroes. When we see the veterans from World War I and World War II, the country saw them as heroes. But then when we fast forward to Vietnam, and it's a war that the people didn't really support, when these veterans start coming home, they're not getting the warm reception. They're getting hostile treatment. And, a lot of these men, they come back with PTSD, and
sometimes a missing arm, a missing leg.
Yeah, they're missing. Yeah,
brain damage. I mean, it's
absolutely
horrific.
It's a sad thing that a young man would go off to a place where he's risking his life for his family, for his society, for his country, and then he comes back and he's spit on. He's not respected in the least. Like in Taxi Driver, that's the result of that, right? Because he's crazy. He becomes like this stalker or whatever. And
did he go to war? Was Travis, what's his name, Bickle or whatever his name is? Did he actually go to war in Taxi Driver? Was he a vet?
That was my understanding.
I'm not sure. I don't remember if he was.
Now I don't know. Look it up, Pico.
What movie?
Taxi Driver.
Da-na-na-na-na-na-na. Pico is looking something up on the internet, and let's see how fast his 5G is acting today. Dun dun.
Travis Bickle is a depressed young war veteran who decides
He
to
is.
take up taxi driving
Depressed
to
young war
remedy
veteran,
his
that's right.
chronic insomnia.
I knew my memory didn't fail me there.
That's right. All right.
So then we have, so I just want to continue with the list, right? So then we exit the 80s and we start entering the 90s. And so then we have like Brad Pitt, right?
Yeah, who
Fight
are the
Club.
heroes in the, yeah.
We have, Mel
Clooney
Gibson
and
is
Pitt
still
in
pretty
Ocean's
active
11,
in the
right?
90s.
You got Denzel Washington. right?
Denzel Washington, man, what a man. Especially the Equalizer movies, primo.
They just made a new one too.
Part 3 is amazing.
Exactly. I forgot all about the other two. It's been so long, but you didn't need the other ones to understand this one.
Yeah. And it's crazy because they're getting older. Like all of our action heroes, they're getting older. It's the reality, right? But they're still kicking butt, man. Like Denzel's kicking butt in the Equalizer.
Got Denzel's son.
Yeah, he's good too. He's good. I just saw the one
I haven't
movie.
seen him. What's he been
The Creator. He's in The Creator.
Yeah, it's like
Denzel's son is doing movies now?
Oh yeah, John David Washington. Yeah, the guy's a great actor. He's a great actor. But before we jump into like the modern times, so we had Pitt, Gibson, Bruce Willis was pretty active in the 90s.
Yeah, he was.
Also.
No, he was.
And then
into the 2000s.
Yeah, and then we enter the 2000s, and now we start getting these new guys.
Hey, what the fuck's Hulk Hogan in all of this, bro?
What? Well, he was a wrestler. Yeah.
But he was also a movie star.
No woman or something can resist.
No woman can resist the lips. I don't know.
You're gonna say not even one Hulk Hogan movie is good? Mr. Nanny? Come on.
I never saw that.
No Holds Barred, though, one of the greatest movies of all time.
Never saw that one either. He was a great wrestler, and he could probably still beat me up to this day. But I would say there are other.
Let me tell you something,
actors.
brother. What you gonna do?
Well, but actually, it's funny that you mentioned Hulk Hogan, because I was gonna say in the 2000s, that's when we get introduced to The Rock. That's when we get introduced. A little bit later on, we get introduced to
Vin
Batista.
Diesel before,
Yeah. Oh yeah, of course Vin Diesel, but he wasn't a wrestler. But there's definitely always been like a connection with wrestling and movies.
I think it's new, right? Because you had Hulk Hogan, that I think was a unique phenomenon, and anybody else that did anything like was kind of minor, right? Like the guy that really blew it up, even beyond Hulk Hogan,
was The Rock. Yeah, for sure,
right.
absolutely.
And then you kind of got Batista in there coming in, right? But it was really
John Cena,
and they've done a couple of movies, but it was really like Hogan, and I think he opened the door for these other guys.
But it's funny because they've all sort of like gone into their own. Like The Rock stuck with action, right? John Cena, he started with action, but it feels like now he's doing more comedical things. And then Batista, the guy is an amazing actor.
Supposedly, I haven't seen him in a lot of stuff. But
bro, like every single thing I've seen him in, he's been amazing. So he's gone more into like.
He's got range.
Oh, he's got range. He's amazing. That guy. I'm saying it on the podcast right now. He's gonna win an Oscar at some point. Guy's amazing.
And you forgot peak masculinity.
Okay, let's hear it.
And it's also peak male physique.
Who's that?
Jack Black.
Oh, Jack
That's
Black.
True. That's true.
I loved him in Nacho Libre.
Nacho Libre, that was an awesome movie, right?
That's more attainable. We could be just like Jack Black.
I'm halfway there, bro.
Yeah, we could beat Jack Black.
I'm halfway there.
Jack Black did something good for mankind. It made us realize that we didn't have to look like Arnold. We didn't have to look like The Rock.
No, Jack Black is the man, bro. You're right. He's at the top of the pyramid.
He's got to be number one. And underneath him, we'll put like Clark Gable or
Nacho
Clint Eastwood.
Esqueleto.
Macho Esqueleto.
Esqueleto, right? A recent movie that I've seen, which I thought was phenomenal, and it goes back to the wrestling, is The Iron Claw. And I know you haven't seen it, but man, what a film. And it touches on so many aspects of masculinity, like from the perspective of the son, from the perspective of the father, not wanting to let him down, earning the respect of your brothers, losing your brothers, losing your family, and then going from being a brother to being an only child. I mean, it's just the emotional journey. I don't cry in films, and I almost cried on this one. So it was powerful. It was impactful. I mean, I recommend anybody watching this, watch The Iron Claw. Like that film, I think it was snubbed. Should have got it nominated for an Oscar or a Golden Globe or something, because Zac Efron, I think, he's like the new action hero guy. Like he's the new.
You think he's got it? Because he still hasn't done anything. He's got the High School Musical.
I think he's way past that. After this film, I think the sky's the limit for this guy. First of all, he has amazing range. He has an amazing work ethic to build up a physique like he has. He just comes off as a very masculine dude. I give him props. I love the film. I think you should watch it when you get a chance. I recommended you watch it with your dad, but you're like, no, like two men watching that movie?
No.
That's not manly.
No. My dad likes the action, and this is like a drama thing, right?
It's drama and action.
And he wants to see bullets flying and punches thrown and all that, right?
The reason I mentioned this is because I feel like there was a period, especially recently, where masculinity in films was sort of looked frowned upon. Going back to our conversation about the war veterans from Vietnam, right? Before, you would go to war and you'd come back and you were a hero. Vietnam, they went to war, they came back and they were zeros. Terrible, horrible. Before, you'd watch an action film would come out, make a ton of money. people wanted to watch these kinds of movies. And recently, it just feels like we haven't had as many of these kinds of films. Do you think that there's like something in society that has changed? And I'm smiling because we know that it has. That's made it so that these movies aren't celebrated as much as they used to be.
Yeah, look, and I think that maybe there's a couple of things there, right? Like maybe there's an element of stuff going through cycles, right? Like you probably did have this period in the 80s and 90s, right? Where, you know, the ante got taken up and it got taken up too much, or, you know, where it dominated and people got bored and needed something new, right? Like when, so, you know, maybe there's an element of that. Yeah, I think maybe society is changing, right? And look, you know, maybe it's hard to put my finger on it, right? I could come up with a bunch of stuff, but it's, you know, it's hard to put my finger on it, right? Maybe there's a move away from violence. Maybe there's you know, a push to have masculinity expressed differently, right? So, you know, if you think about it from, you know, the 20s, we had World War I, the 40s, we had World War II, you had Vietnam, you had the Korean War before that. You had the shadow of the Cold War, basically from like, you know, effectively 1948 or whenever Churchill gave that Iron Curtain speech, all the way till 1992, right? So there was always this threat of war, needing to fight and die. And when you have the threat of war, that's kind of what you need man for, that type of man for, right? And as that threat went down, you know, it fell in 92. I guess you had the terrorists come in 2011, but has there really been a big threat like the Soviet Union or the wars we fought in the past? And have we been worried about that threat as a country, right? Because we've gotten, you know, there was a period post 1992 where we were effectively the only superpower for the last 30 years. And the way we fought wars, right, was planes dropping bombs versus soldiers shooting, right? The nature, if you look at the Iraq war, it was different. So yeah, maybe that's kind of affected it to some degree.
You know, maybe it's because, you know, we're in a time where masculine men are being accused of being toxic, and maybe there is a kind of masculinity that is toxic. But for the majority of men, I think that expressing their masculinity shouldn't be something that they're scared to do. I don't believe that they should worry that they're going to be canceled because they're being themselves, because they're being manly men. That mentality is reflecting in our movies. I think back to myself when I was a kid, and I remember watching these movies with masculine men and wanting to be like them. And I feel like these days, perhaps because we're labeling it toxic masculinity, or because society has changed, or maybe it's because, like you said, it's like a cyclical thing. We're not seeing as many masculine movies. Let's not be scared that somebody's going to accuse us of being toxic. Masculinity expresses itself in different ways, and there's nothing wrong with a man wanting to be a man.
I don't think in any of these movies, and maybe I'm wrong, and maybe it says that I'm bat crazy, right? But in all of the movies, right, Stallone and Arnold, right, they weren't assholes. They weren't toxic, right?
No, at all.
Maybe they were toxic to the bad guy, right?
Yeah, that's true.
That was
that's
it,
true.
right? They were toxic to the guy that crossed them.
And we cheered them on when they were toxic to the bad guy.
They weren't toxic.
I just want to say, when a man is around a feminine woman, he becomes more manly. And I think she becomes more feminine. They juxtapose each other, but they also complement each other. And maybe we're going to have to do a second episode to talk about how femininity contributes to masculinity and how they both work together for the good of each other, if that makes any sense.
No. I think it does, right? And, you know, I think on the femininity side, you know, if anything, right, it's probably been quelched more than masculinity, right? Because in this big push, right, and it's a rightful, justifiable push, right? Because at the end of the day, right, women should have every single opportunity that a man has, right?
Absolutely.
And much of the progress that the United States made technologically, economically, right, post the 1950s, was due to this trend started in World War II, right? Whereas the men were fighting, the women were working, right? And that transition of women going into the workforce, right, was a tremendous economic engine, right? So somewhere along the lines, right, I think feminism got confused with, hey, we're the same, and in order to be equal, we have to be the same. And I think we can be equal yet different. We can have equal opportunities yet be different. And then when you look at like a woman in a lot of movies, right, rather than being feminine, right, they make her some badass where she's kicking ass and she's got to be as tough as the guy and smoking the cigarette and all that. And there's a place for that, right? Like sometimes that's cool and that works, right? But when it becomes the cliche and the only role, right, that the woman can have, you're missing out on kind of some of these traditional feminine roles or ideals where there's a place for that, and that doesn't diminish a woman, right? Women aren't diminished by having that, right, or doing that, or having that role, and they can still be successful and they can still be heroic in that context, right, without having to be like the Steven Seagal, right, of femininity, right, or feminism, right? There's femininity and there's feminism. Not every feminist movie has to be expressed by having some Steven Seagal equivalent of the female character, right?
Right. Yeah.
You don't need that.
You're right. You're absolutely right. Well, I'm glad I got a chance to talk to you today about this. Masculinity in movies, it's important. It's also a lot of fun to watch a man kick ass. Ain't nothing wrong with a macho movie. You know what I mean?
No, there isn't.
No, absolutely not. But thank you for watching Macho Cine Talks. Check us out on Instagram. Check us out on...
What's the name of the Facebook, but with the other one for the young people?
I don't use any of that, man, so I'm even worse.
Look at the movies we're talking about, right? We're talking about movies from the 80s and the 90s. That's something that existed back then. Check us out on Instagram. Check us out on TikTok. Check us out everywhere you can check us out. Appreciate you. See you on the next show. Peace.
Check us out on MySpace. I'm on Friendster.
Yeah.
You can also see on
You can download this
AOL
podcast on Napster.
My
Fair share.
I'll send you my AOL instant messenger name.
Lights, camera,